Welcome everyone. Thanks so much for coming to herb class again every 2 weeks now, and then we might have a bigger stretch depending on Katrina's schedule for August. But we're so happy to be here at Rancho Arbol, which is Caren and 80's farm connected to Rancho del Gallo here, and all of these beautiful pastures and this beautiful venue. So we're happy to be teaching here because that is part of the work that we're doing here at Rancho Arbol and with the farm market. This is where our market is if you haven't been up here on Tuesdays. Great place to get some local goods and support local farms and producers. Today we have Emily Hartnett and Caren von Gontard who will be presenting for our class on pasture herbs this morning, and then this afternoon we'll be doing some hands-on work with herbs from pastures and also garden herbs as well. So thanks so much for being here. We have Linden infusion again today in the morning, and we'll be drinking mullein this afternoon.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily. Thanks for coming. Most of you know me. And I raise animals here in Paonia. I raise dairy goats and steers. I have some cows right now, and in the past I've raised pigs and sheep. I have chickens, and so I have quite a bit of experience with livestock. And I also have had cats, and and I generally treat my animals with herbs, keeping their immune systems healthy. So I'm not a clinical herbalist or a vet, but I've been raising animals for a long time, keeping them away from conventional Western medicines whenever I can. So, and if you guys have any questions while I'm talking, please feel free to ask them. We can kind of keep it casual, and you can ask questions as they come up. I make my infusions in this pot. It's still a little dirty. And this pot I got on the internet, and it has marks here for quarts. So I fill it to 4 quarts to a gallon. And the lid, you can see, has like a strainer on it. So I fill it to 4 quarts, I boil the water, and then I add 4 ounces of the herb or 2 ounces of linden. And then I let it sit in the pot for 8 to 10 hours. And for me, this is easier for some reason than the jars. Whenever I tried to make infusions in quart jars, I don't know, I just didn't work. So then I can like really strain out the herb. You know, I'll take the lid off, and I use this strainer, and I brought this little thing. This is a great thing. It fits on the wide mouth and the small mouth jars. So then I'll pour it out through the strainer into 4 jars, and then once the liquid's out, I can really like get in there and like really squeeze the herb, get it out, and then I fill it again. I always do a rebrew just because there's so much herb in there. And then I put those quart jars in the fridge, and then I love to like open the fridge in the middle of the day, and there's infusion sitting there. And I drink a lot, like sometimes a gallon a day if I'm really thirsty. And then sometimes I'll go for 2 days that gallon. But for me, it's just kind of an easier way to keep on top of it. And then I always have the rebrew. And sometimes I'll drink that, and I do that with every herb just because it's there. And so if I don't drink it, I can feed it to the animals, or I'll feed it to the plants. And then after the second brew, that herb then goes to the compost or goes around a plant or something like that. And it ends up being a lot. Like, you know, a couple of days of doing that, I'll like fill a 5-gallon bucket of the compost herb. 4 ounces at a time is a lot. But I like doing it that way. And so I just wanted to offer that to you as an alternative. And then I like to drink the infusions cold. According to Susan Weed, if you drink them cold, it goes into your bloodstream faster. If you drink them warm, it kind of like sits in your stomach for a couple hours. And so, especially in the summer, I just love them cold.
What do you tend to drink most? What infusion do you make the most?
That depends. I tend to drink comfrey a lot because it grows really well for me. I really love the linden so much. I really try and rotate them through Probably the one that I drink the least is probably red clover, and that's not because I don't like it. It's more just like 4 ounces of red clover is so much, and then I'm out of it, and then I have to go get more. And so yeah, so I find that with the oat straw and the comfrey, it's easier to get kind of bigger quantities of it. But I really try and keep the 5, and the nettles. I like to kind of go through the nettles a little bit more just because of allergies, and I find the nettles gives me a lot of energy, makes me feel really strong, and so I try and go back to the nettles, especially this time of year when my allergies are acting up more frequently. I found since integrating the infusions in this quantity into my diet that the plant world is more communicative with me, that the plants will like tell me, if I don't even know a plant, they'll tell me their name. If there's something wrong with my goat, I'll immediately know what it needs. And I found that, like, I kind of used to be able to do that, but now I can do it better. And I think it's because, like, just taking in such a kind of large amount of the plants has kind of gifted me this kind of language of being able to hear them better. And that really helps me take care of my animals. So I really love the infusions, and I highly recommend them. Animals love infusions too. And some animals, like the livestock, can eat the infusion herbs without you having to make the infusion, which is really nice. Like the goats love to eat comfrey, they love to eat oat, straw, all of it. Cows, horses, sheep, they'll all kind of eat some of that so that you don't have to prepare it. But you still can. You can prepare infusions for them and mix it in their water, give it to them. If there's an acute problem, if you're having an animal that's not eating or drinking, you can use like a syringe without the needle on it and squirt infusion into their mouths. I find that can be helpful for animals. You can kind of give some to them every day in their water and then leave them a plain water and see what they drink. So the infusions are really great for everyone, especially for cats and dogs too that don't eat plants. You can mix it in with milk. That most animals will drink infusions in milk or tinctures. So milk is a really great carrier for cats and dogs. And even like my goats like to drink milk still sometimes. So sometimes I'll mix a tincture for a goat that likes to drink milk, and she'll drink it right up. Any questions so far? Great. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about choosing to go the herbal path with animals versus a Western conventional path. And it's very similar with humans, that with animals you're just working to keep their immune system healthy all the time so that major problems don't come up. Herbal remedies work differently than an antibiotic or something like that, in that they don't work as quickly, and that you would have to do them more frequently. So if something comes up, your animal's sick, you want to keep on the tinctures maybe every hour, whereas if an animal came up, you would give them a shot of penicillin once a day or something like that. So that's something to think about, that the herbs work slower, and that you can't keep an unhealthy animal and then expect the herbs to work when it has a problem. That the animal needs to be in tip-top shape by having a diverse diet and having lots of herbs and keeping them healthy. And then when they do have a problem, the herbs will respond because they're already kind of at a higher level of health. A lot of people who have pets or livestock have to consider vaccines, antibiotics, which path you want to go. And penicillin can solve a lot of problems, especially in livestock when they can take a turn really quickly. And but I know some ranchers around here, Carla Chapey says that if her cow needs an antibiotic, it'll die because she's not going to give it an antibiotic. And so that's, yeah. So that's kind of everyone's personal choice, how you want to deal with it. I work hard to keep my animals healthy, and I have used penicillin and have had it save lives. And so it's a pretty amazing thing to be able to use penicillin and, have an infection go away. And the Gillespies at the Living Farm, Ben always tells me, oh, there's something wrong with the cow, give him penicillin. Something wrong with the other cow, give him penicillin. So, there's a difference here how, you can see that, even at the Living Farm where they're organic, sometimes if an animal gets sick, it's maybe better than having it die to give it something. Vaccines are a different thing for livestock. Some people will choose to give vaccines and then follow an herbal path, and so whatever you choose works. I don't give my animals vaccines, and I last year lost a small goat to tetanus that he wouldn't have died if I had given a vaccine. Tetanus exists in 90% of the soil in the county, and so if there's an open wound, the animal can get it. If they have the vaccine, they won't die from it. A lot of people also believe that the homeopathics work like a vaccine for animals. You can give a tetanus homeopathic and keep them updated with those homeopathics. Personally, I don't know about that, but some people use them and say they work great on their livestock as an alternative to vaccines. And so that's just something to consider, that you're taking a risk if you're not doing these things, but if you're keeping your animals healthy, and kind of finding that line between domestication and keeping them wild. I think that my young goat that got tetanus got it through his horn disc budding. So I burned their horn, so that's like a domestication activity that then I don't vaccinate them. So it's like kind of finding this balance. Like if I left their horns on, then they wouldn't have open wounds. So, it's not always so clear cut. So the one thing just to remember is if you are wanting to use herbs to keep your animals healthy, that they can go downhill fast. You can one day think, oh, that cow doesn't look so good. And, the next day it's like almost dead. So it's good to act quickly and, do what you need to do. And that's, obviously your choice. So the most important thing to keep animals healthy, we're kind of talking general here, but is a diverse diet, and that's, including cats and dogs as well. My cat keeps up a very diverse diet with her chipmunks and voles and moles and birds, and, so she figures it out, and I think that's important for dogs too, to, mix it up a little bit so they're not always on one thing, and, people talk about feeding raw meat and, things like that. So I think keeping diversity, and for grazing animals, pasture diversity is really important, as well as their hay and what you're feeding them. So around here, you can get alfalfa hay. Alfalfa hay is really high in protein, and that's really good for dairy animals that are making protein. And my beef cows love alfalfa hay. They would much prefer to eat that, but they just kind of get really big and fat on that, which is okay too. And so the alfalfa is kind of the top quality hay, but some animals can't eat so much protein, like horses and donkeys. You wouldn't want to feed them alfalfa, maybe one flake per whole bale of grass or something, but it's just too rich for them. And what I find with my milking goats is right now they're on some first cutting hay, and they're on pasture as well. and the milk is a little bit like thinner, also because it's summer and hot. And when I move into fall and they're on a third cutting alfalfa hay and it starts to get cold, then the milk starts to get really thick. And it actually makes more cheese when they're on that richer diet. So it's like a thicker, creamier milk. And a lot of the hay around here, there's clover, which is really, we all love clover and know it, and it's a really great thing to have in the hay, especially for pregnant animals. If you have cows or horses or goats or sheep that are going to be pregnant for the winter, getting them some clover hay is really beneficial for their uterine strength and keeping them healthy. And then a lot of the hay around here, the grass hay, is usually a mixture of orchard grass and fescue and a brome. And these are all just mixes, and this is great. My goats don't particularly like grass, and when my cows get used to the alfalfa, then they turn their nose up at the grass hay. So you can definitely tell that it's a little bit lower. Doesn't taste as sweet. It's a little bit more like straw, a little bit harder to chew. But that hay is what's great for, like I said, horses and donkeys. If you're trying to dry off a dairy animal, you would want to take it off the alfalfa and put it on a grass hay. And that's most of the hay you can buy around here. And I think in the future we can start to see some more diversified pastures and diversified hay. I love when the hay has plantain in it, willows, chicories, dandelions. I love to see all of that in my hay. So that's really beneficial for the goats to eat, for any animals to kind of eat that, especially through the winter when they might be getting the same bale every day, and if there's some diversity in it, they really appreciate it. And then for grazing, I have big dreams that, the animals could graze on these huge, like multi-plant pastures with comfrey in it and oats and plantain and lots of dandelions and, barley in there for them. And I think for grazing animals, there's, around here that's kind of like grass, alfalfa, clover, and you can plant different mixes and really kind of get the pastures going. And I think that's really neat to see a big diversity in plants on grazing pastures, and really makes a difference in the quality of the meat and the milk and the flavor of the cheese. So apparently Swiss cheese, they say, has its flavor because of the herbs that are growing in Switzerland that the cows are eating, and so that you can't really make Swiss cheese out of Switzerland, kind of like wine, like the terroir of the region. And so that's important to look around here and see, what's our terroir and what are our animals eating. And, ultimately when you're eating meat or drinking milk, if the animal is being well taken care of, you're really just eating and drinking like an herbal mix. If your animals are, out on this pasture eating that, then you get to take that in, and it's really beautiful. So the more high quality food that your animals are eating, then you're going to get nourished with that, and obviously that is the better way to go. Let's see, I want to read something here. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Okay.
Somebody just recently told me that they came across some kind of article about pasture mixes, and in the, I guess, early 1900s, it turns out that even in the U.S., I'm not sure what regions, but they purposefully planted chicory and dock as a part of the mix because it was really beneficial to the animals. It surprised me because I'm, always fighting dock. It's so invasive. I don't want it. It's just, no, another one. I have to cut down the head at least. But it's interesting. So now instead of digging it up, I just cut off the seed head so it doesn't get, take over. But I was surprised. I had no idea.
Yeah, and I think it depends on what animals too. Like I'll notice if there's like horses in a pasture, the dock will go to seed, but like the goats and the sheep will eat the dock. So having like a mixed herd, then everything kind of gets eaten too.
I haven't had any luck on anybody eating the dock.
Yeah. 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 So I'm going to read a quote from Susan Weed. She raises goats in New York. My goats are not on fenced pasture, but are allowed to roam. They eat an enormous variety of medicinal herbs, such as rose leaves, raspberry leaves, goldenrod, burdock, plantain seeds, wild mustards, and onion grass. When I began my goat journey, I went out with my goats in a notebook every day and kept a record of what they ate. I came to appreciate that the goats would wait until a certain time in a plant's life before they'd eat it. Sometimes I would think they didn't like a plant, and then later, when it had matured, they would eat it. They taught me to be aware that plants are not the same every day, that their constituents change with the seasons. So not only is goat's milk herbal medicine, the goats themselves are teachers of herbal medicine. So I really like this because the goats have helped me, like with mullein, for example. They eat it like right at this perfect little time, and they don't eat it the rest of the year. They eat it right when those little rosettes kind of come and are just about to shoot up. And so to me, that means like that's when the mullein is ready to harvest, like when it has the most nutrition. And so that's just kind of an example. And, I watch what the goats eat, and I love to see them out eating everything, and then I get to drink the milk the next day and get all of that. I'll also notice occasionally the goats will eat plants that are poisonous to them, but like one little nibble that maybe they know that they need like a little bit of poison, but not too much, but a little bit to like kill some worms or something like that. And so it's interesting to see even the older goats that know that those plants are poisonous to them might take like one little leaf of milkweed and then walk on. So it's interesting to watch and see what they eat. There's a lot of local plants around here that are really great for animals. And I notice my cows eating all these plants too. And, the goats are kind of the most extreme, diverse eaters. But like I said, I notice my cows reaching up in the trees and eating leaves and nibbling at the rose bushes and eating a little bit of roses and eating some willows. So some of my favorites are the elm. Elm is one of my favorites around here, which is probably different to most people. But the goats love the elm so much, and the elm is a natural dewormer for all the animals. I also noticed the deer and the elk eat it. The goats really love to strip the bark and get that inner cambium layer off, and I think that's where a lot of the medicine is. And so then I like to strip that inner cambium layer off and make a tincture of that elm as well. But so natural dewormer for all the animals around here is elm. You could even dry the bark and make a powder and give it to your dogs and cats. Mix with water in a syringe or something like that. The leaves are also a natural dewormer. So if you have a lot of elms, then call someone who has goats. But my friend said that her donkeys love it too, and so lots of animals really like the elm a whole lot. Another natural dewormer around here is the artemisia that grows around here. Kind of looks like wormwood. Is it mugwort?
Sage, mugwort will grow around here, but mostly cultivated. Are you talking about like the Artemisia tridentata, the bushy sage?
Kinda, yeah.
Artemisia absinthium, which is wormwood, but also normally cultivated. Although once it's cultivated, it's pretty tenacious, so it'll hang out.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Maybe I've seen a lot of that. So the wormwood works really well, obviously, as a natural dewormer. and also mugwort. So the Artemisia, what's the wormwood?
The Artemisia absinthe.
Yeah, and then the mugwort is the Artemisia vulgaris. So both of those are really great, dried flowering. But the wormwood's a little intense, so I would lean more towards the mugwort, just because, you know, the wormwood will kill the worms, but, you know, you don't really need something so intense.
So really strong tasting.
Yeah. Yeah, they maybe don't like it as much and won't eat as much.
Yeah. However, for human use, the Artemisia absinthium, the wormwood, is coming up again and again as like a really powerful antibiotic herb, and so I've been tincturing that to use in low dose for human consumption, because it's coming up against like all kinds of things from like what you get from the mosquitoes, the malaria,
West Nile.
and West Nile, stuff like that. So so all of that Artemisia family, very bitter but also really potent medicine.
And the goats like it.
Are you saying the absinthe, does it grow wild here?
It doesn't generally grow wild. Normally it's cultivated in this area. However, it's a very tenacious plant. So even if it's like was grown, cultivated a long time ago and abandoned, it might still be alive.
Is it
can
a
live
big
without
leaf?
much water? It will get big if it's tended. If it's not tended, it'll be like a little scraggly and
But
smaller.
it's not the same as the
Sagebrush.
culinary sage.
No,
No.
culinary sage is actually a salvia, not an Artemisia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I mean, it's hard to, it kind of has like a grayish leaf, kind of open, and so I think I've seen around here almost like naturalized, like where it's like self-seeded and stuff like that. I've seen it growing in areas like that. Deworming animals is best on the full moon, 3 days, the day before, the day of, and the day after. It seems to be when the worms like to party. So if you want to zap them, most livestock have worms. They'll just always have worms, and that's okay. The problem is when they get to be too much, and you'll notice your animal's coat won't look so good. They might start getting thin. They might start losing their hair. Might like kind of lose hair on their nose. That's kind of like a sign of a little worminess. And so keeping on top of that is really good. There are chemical dewormers that I would advise to avoid. Obviously, if your goat's going to die from worms, then use a chemical wormer if the herbs aren't working, but it's just much better to keep your animals, like I said, healthy, and then these herbs will work and keep them, because you're not trying to eliminate every single worm. You just want to keep it a healthy population, and the chemical wormers, they're great to use if your animal's really at a bad place, but don't let your animal get to that place. I've used them on animals that like I bought from someone that didn't look so good, and wormed them before they came on the farm, and so now I don't buy animals that don't look good. So it's just important, because if you're going to use the chemical dewormer, then you're kind of killing the beneficial bacterias. You're killing your animal a little bit. If you're trying to kill the worms. So for deworming, I would really try and stick with the herbs. Black walnut is another one I've seen mixed in to mixes, and the wormwood. And then sometimes if I have an animal that doesn't want to take an herb, I can put it powder it up a little bit and mix it with some molasses. And that's pretty hard for any livestock to resist a molasses kelp mixture, even if it has a little bit of that. And then for the cats and dogs, I'm able to just put a little bit of tincture in some milk again for them, or my cat, like in a little bit of tuna fish water or something like that, and then she'll drink it. But it's important, because the animals, they'll get worms, and that can take an animal down pretty quickly.
So how often would you deworm these herbs?
If I'm just using like the mugwort, something basic, I would do it every full moon. And just to kind of keep it in check. Probably more in the summer than, if I forget about it in the winter a little bit, it's usually okay. And keeping your animals' stalls clean is really important, and giving them access to clean water. I think this is overlooked a lot. I clean out my goats' water buckets every morning, and they get fresh, clean water. And for my cows, I notice on their big tanks that it develops this film. And so I have a scrub brush, and every time I fill it, I scrub all that stuff, and they seem to like it better when it's really fresh and clean. And that helps your milk quality, it helps the meat quality, and it helps keep the worms away. If there's poop in their water and they don't have a clean water option and they have to drink water with poop in it on a hot day like this, they have more of a chance of getting worms.
Emily, does any of this apply to chickens?
Yeah, all of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, the chickens are actually a lot easier, I find, to feed herbs because I can like mix it in with their feed. And like their feed's usually kind of powdery anyway, so I'll just throw some herbs into their feed and mix it with little milk, and they'll take it right up. Whereas like my goats are a lot pickier, but all of this applies to chickens as well. And I find too with chickens that the diatomaceous earth, which I don't think works as well with other animals, works good for deworming chickens.
Mix that in with the
Yeah, mix it in with their feed. Yeah. Or, I like to make like a mash for the chickens if I'm trying to feed them. And it could just be their feed mixed with milk or their feed mixed with water. And then they tend to eat it all. And they don't like kind of throw it out, stuff like that. Yeah. Mhm. For the chickens? Yeah, so I would just, like how the chicken food is kind of like powdery. If you just pour a little milk in it, then it turns to like a cereal, oatmeal kind of consistency like that. Not like a wet soup, but just enough so that it like all kind of sticks together. And I just like to do that anyway. It just wastes less feed, the feed that is powder. And adds a little bit of protein, and I have milking goats, so I always have extra milk and whey and stuff, but the end of your jar of milk, put a little warm water in it and swish it around and dump it in the chicken feed or something like that. Another good local plant is willow. Animals love willow, all of them. My cows love it, the horses love it. Willow has aspirin in it, so it's a really nice pain reliever. I had a goat this spring that her arthritis started acting up. She's 10. And I started feeding her willow every day and comfrey, and she got better pretty quickly, and she really enjoyed the willow. And you could tell that her legs were kind of hurting her, and she just devoured it. And the goats eat the leaves and the bark. Another thing you can do is kind of make like a willow infusion for like your horse or your cow, or if you have a really sick animal that's not eating. Making a willow bark infusion would be really nice pain relief for an animal. Like I said, I notice all the livestock kind of enjoying diversity in their diet. If they can get around a tree, they'll try and nibble it a little bit and see what it is. And then also, like I said, you can feed them infusions and they can drink it. Another one I really like is the equisetum infusion. They can drink it, and it's also nice topical, like spray. Like if you make an equisetum infusion, it's like antifungal. So if they have like a little weird skin thing, I had a couple goats years ago that would get this little like gray skin stuff on their ears, and it really helped. The equisetum made it go away. If they had like hoof rot or some fungal thing on their foot, spraying the equisetum infusion on that topically could really help. And equisetum's all around here too. And then I also like to consider an herbal first aid kit for the barn or for your pets. And this is, kind of in acute situations. And like I said, you want to act fast with herbs, fast and frequently if you have a problem. So if there's an open wound or an infection, a scrape, it's better not to try and close it, actually. If their skin has ripped, because you could kind of close in an infection if you wanted to sew it up for some reason. I would not recommend that. Keeping it open and yarrow tincture on any problem like that is really great. And keeping an eye on it. But like I said, it's not just you go down in the morning and spray yarrow tincture and you're fine. Go down every hour and check on them and keep spraying. Mastitis is an issue that comes up for people that have milking animals. A great thing for mastitis is echinacea tincture mixed with poke root tincture. And Susan Weed recommends 1 ounce bottle of echinacea with 1 dropper full of poke in the bottle, and then use it like that, because the poke root is really strong. So you don't really want to give it maybe directly poke root. I don't know. Is it strong?
It's strong depending on the situation. If it was very severe, maybe you would do 5 drops of poke with some water. But that's, that would be strong. But I would start there if you're dealing with a major problem. And then what Susan recommends if you're working like that is every day increasing the poke by 1 drop. So day 1, mastitis, 5 drops of poke, maybe every 3 hours, and then day 2, 6 drops, and on like that until either the animal or person, if it's a person who's dealing with mastitis, starts feeling nauseous from the poke because it does have toxicity and will create nausea, or until there's relief. But I personally prefer the echinacea way because it's a really nice buffer and they have a great synergy together.
And so for mastitis, echinacea poke, and you can do that every hour, every couple hours to dose an animal until there is relief. Another good thing for mastitis is warm boiled cabbage leaves as a poultice, and you would hold that on the udder. And, so that's you could be sitting there for a while. I did it this spring on a goat that had mastitis, and I was able to save her from, I have another goat years ago that got mastitis, and she'll never make milk on that side again now. But with the boiled cabbage leaves and the echinacea this spring, I was able to heal it so that she's back up to full production now a few months later. So that was really good to kind of see that. Comfrey poultice can also help a lot with mastitis on the animals. But, standing there with your goat and holding it there, it's not really going to be fun for anyone. So, keeping them happy with some grain while they're doing that. But it does feel good for them because, it hurts. The mastitis hurts. And so to have some warm compress, it feels good. Other things shepherd's purse tincture can be helpful during birth if there's a lot of bleeding. The shepherd's purse can help postpartum bleeding for an animal. Let's see, I said about the dried flowering mugwort for the worms. St. John's wort tincture. It's really nice to have in the barn for everything, really. It's calms their nerves. It can relieve pain. It's just a sweet herb, and I've really noticed it kind of help if they have if they're a little bit scared, if they have rapid heart rate. I've had it help in kidding. I have one goat that is kind of neurotic, and she won't let me leave the barn when she's in labor, and giving her the St. John's wort really well, I still can't leave the barn, but she calms down a little bit enough so that she can give birth. Apple cider vinegar is a really neat thing to add to your animal's water. It's very helpful for pregnant animals, but also just in general. I like to offer them 1 bucket with apple cider vinegar and then the rest with regular water. And, some days they don't need it, some days they drink it all immediately. But it's just a nice thing to offer them. And for healthy pregnancy for animals, the dried raspberry leaves are a great addition to their diet. And a lot of animals love kelp. Any kelp products, there's like an Acadian kelp that my goats really like. And yeah, it just has so many minerals and they just really love it. It's also really important to keep your animals with salt lick or a free choice salt. And then, I'm not sure if this applies to all livestock, but at least goats and sheep really like to have baking soda, free choice. And I don't know about cows, but it can help with if they eat something poisonous, if they have indigestion, if they're bloated, they'll go over and eat baking soda and it'll get them better. I've seen it stop bloat on a sheep that was like completely laid out. We gave it some baking soda and it just like, you could like see the bloat like go away. I just put it in a like mineral trough and they just come and lick it. But for like that sheep that was dying, I mixed it with water and squirted it in its mouth. And it got better. Yeah, so they'll just come lick like the dry baking soda, like a free choice mineral kind of. And motherwort and hawthorn tincture I also really like for the animals to calm them down. Like sometimes the goats function on like a kind of like a hummingbird level sometimes, and I think the hawthorn kind of helps get their heart rates down and calms them down a little bit if they're upset about something. And so, does anyone have questions about any of those? Yeah, Dee Dee? I'd say that animals are pretty sensitive. So, a little bit goes a long way with them. I think consistency is better than more. But, a lot of times I'll just do like for a tincture, like a dropper full. The poke root's obviously going to be a lot less, but usually just kind of like a dropper full of the tincture mixed in something or just squirt it right in their mouth. I've also found flower essences, particularly the rescue remedy, to be helpful. I think because animals are so sensitive that the flower essences really are quite effective with them. And I don't know too much about flower essences, but I know that I've used the rescue remedy and it's worked. And I think just kind of feel it out with, if you're having an extreme case, you can dose them a little more. Most of these herbs we're talking about, besides the poke root, aren't harmful. You can't really overdo it. I mean, I guess you could, but you can't really. If you dump the whole bottle in their mouth or something. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, just like a little, like a little splash in a 5-gallon bucket. I think like a lot of things I noticed, I think it like balances their pH in their rumens a little bit. I think it helps their skin kind of be like less dry here, like less flaky. I've noticed their coats are shinier. Seems to just kind of like keep them cleaner. There's probably a better answer to that, but it's something I just kind of started doing because someone told me to. It works well. So, especially for healthy pregnancies. And I don't know, would you know why that would work well, Alicia?
I think that balancing the pH bleach is a good.
Yeah.
And then I know that that apple cider vinegar in the plant world kind of reacts with minerals and binds minerals.
Okay.
And then also helps to break down plants and cell walls, so maybe it can help their digestion in that way by helping. I mean, although all those stomachs, they probably don't need as much help as we do in accessing nutrient from the food, but potentially.
Helps break it down. Great. So the top thing that you're looking for with your animals is a good diet, and like I said, that comes from the pasture, the hay, and the health of your pasture. So a great way to get your pasture healthy is to put animals on it. It's pretty much the best way. And then what I've noticed is the things that the animals need will start to grow more. Like when I put the cows for the first time out on my old farm on Garvin Mesa, the next year there was like an insane amount of clover, more than I had seen the whole 10 years I was there. And the way that it all works together, I think it comes out in their poop, but it's also like the land kind of gets to understand what the animals need, the action of their hooves, kind of digs up some roots and pushes seeds down and lets things grow better. And I mean, I'm just always amazed to see how pastures around here improve over the years by people adding animals to it, especially if they're rotating pastures, paying attention to, not letting the animals eat too much or eat it down too far and moving them before they've eaten too much. It really takes very little time to get your pasture from something that is like run down with not great plants. Add some cows to it, and the next year it looks amazing. So the animals obviously fertilize what they're eating. The cows, and Pat, maybe you can correct me on this, but cows technically fertilize twice as much as the space they're on, so if they eat 1 acre of food, they're fertilizing 2 acres. So you really get a lot of fertilization by adding cows to your property. And then when you get to eat, the meat and drink the milk, like I said, you get to take in all these plants and this life force of this animal being under the sun and eating these amazing grasses and clovers and alfalfas and everything else. And one thing I wanted to talk about around here is there's a copper deficiency, and I've noticed that over the years in my animals. Haven't really figured out a way to solve it without copper directly, because any plants you grow here are going to have that copper deficiency because the soil has it. So, if you're feeding them a plant that maybe is higher in copper minerals, it's still going to be a little bit low. And so the living farm, you're not supposed to feed sheep copper at all. They're like poisonous. Copper's poisonous to sheep, but Lynn feeds her sheep free choice copper. They have at all times the choice to go eat the copper. So that means that there's, she really sees that as a problem and a deficiency, that she's willing to give her sheep copper and that they're not dying from it because they're so deficient in it. Copper deficiency can look like hair loss and thinning, and it's just like there's not enough in the pastures around here. There's not enough in the hay, and some animals need it more. Like, I don't think that my cows are copper deficient at all. I did just see on Facebook that one of the yaks out in Crawford just died from a copper deficiency. So I guess those bovines can have copper deficiency as well. But I do see it quite a bit in my goats. And I'll give them like a copper bolus or give them like a loose mineral of copper. That's definitely something to look out for because it can look like other things. It can look like worms or malnutrition. And then you give them a little copper bolus, and like in a week their hair is back. It's like this pill, like a big pill, and you would get it at like a vet store. You can get them at the vet store in Delta, and then you just like shoot it down their throat. It's quite unpleasant. And I wanted to share with you a loose mineral, like an herbal loose mineral recipe. And this can replace a loose mineral besides salt. So I would still feed them salt, and I would still feed them maybe like a copper supplement, but you can replace any loose mineral supplement with this recipe. So you start with 10 pounds of kelp, and then you would add 1 cup of nettle leaves, 1 cup of raspberry leaves, 1 cup of comfrey leaf, and then a half a cup of each of the following. Yeah, half cup of each of the following. Rose hips, dandelion root, Pau de Arco. That's the only one that's not from around here. Can you grow it around here? No. In a greenhouse. So that would be something. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You got it?
No, I haven't, but you could.
You could. Yeah.
But
I haven't seen it around.
take some doing.
Uh-huh.
You have to have a tall greenhouse.
Yeah. So that's when you can order from Mountain Rose Herbs. And burdock root. And then you kind of put all that in a blender so you can kind of powder it up a bit to make it like kind of a loose mineral consistency. And then you would just offer that free choice to your animals in like a trough. And my goat. First half cup was rose hip. Rose hip, and then dandelion root, Pau de Arco, and burdock root are the half cups. Mhm. Uh-huh. Mhm. Yeah, including rabbits, dogs, and cats. And, you know, for dogs, you could mix this into a milk slurry, and, you know, or mix into their food, something like that, you know, with a little oil or something into their dry food. Mhm. I don't know, really. I don't know. Yeah.
It's antifungal.
Okay. Mhm. Antifungal.
We could potentially substitute with equisetum.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good idea. So you could put equisetum in instead of the Pau de Arco for the antifungal action. Mhm. My goats love this. I can't make it enough for them. I don't know if you guys know Jeannie Hergenrother, but she feeds her goats this every day, and her goats are really shiny and beautiful and really super healthy. And so, you know, the proof is in the pudding. I would love to feed my goats this every day, but, you know, doesn't. Once I mix it up, and then a couple months will go by. And, yeah. So, but it's just a really nice recipe to have, and, you know, if you only have a few animals, you can make this up and have it for many, many months. I'll make this up and it'll be gone pretty quickly. So, yeah, so then I'll just offer it free choice to the livestock. Yeah. And, does anyone have questions at this point? Anything I haven't really covered? Mm-hmm.
Well, we've done some infusions with flowers and leaves. We haven't really talked about the bark though. How do you, is it fresh, like off the tree? Do you let it dry, or how do you go about doing a bark infusion?
Willow
Yeah, like
And
she's talking about, yeah.
or elm.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah, same.
And
Oh,
some
how do you
barks
do
are
it?
okay
You
to
can
do coffee
infuse it.
as well.
You know, you can strip it and infuse it.
So yeah, I would dry it first still. So still dry it first. And then the same, like 1 ounce per quart. And then, like Alicia said, you can also do a decoction where then you would like cook it down even more to make it less liquid and more. But usually I would just like for the willow bark, just do 1 ounce per quart or 4 ounces for a gallon and let it sit 8 to 10 hours. But first I would kind of like shave the bark off the willow and let it dry for a day. And then I'd go through and like snip it into small pieces or something like that.
Elm though, are you is it the inner bark of elm?
You can do it on like the sticks, like the younger elm branches where the bark is smooth. And that's what the goats will eat. That's where I think the sweetest inner cambion is. because they don't eat that rough stuff. They just eat that younger growth that, you know, when you can, I can just get a knife under it and it'll just like, the whole thing will peel right off.
So do you know though, like, we've had some elms that have been cut down, like how, you know, how far can you go into where it's been attached from the living tree to where it's still viable to all?
Like for an infusion?
Uh-huh.
Oh, I think it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, go for it, even if it's been a while, because it's kind of like drying it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You dried it in the sun already? Yeah. 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 Yeah, they want them fresh. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so they say that the goats shouldn't eat below their knees, which is why goats are browsers. They eat up, but then there's like no parasites. Like if they're always eating up, they're never eating parasites. And so goats are actually not really pasture animals. They much would prefer to be in a woodland, to be in a gully, to be able to. They also say that for goats, when they eat in this direction, it closes off one stomach and opens up a more efficient stomach on their throat. And if they eat down, then the less efficient stomach is open. So it's something to consider on feeders. Like you want your hay feeder where the goat has to kind of go like this a little bit, not the hay feeder on the ground where their head is down. So that's kind of a little interesting goat knowledge. Cows and horses obviously eat off the ground. But I think for all animals, you know, to keep them, you know, worm-free, really having their own feeder where they're not eating off the ground is really the best thing for them. Yeah, and keep the worm load down, and, you know, in the winter it gets all wet on the ground where they eat a lot and poopy. So sometimes it's like throwing flakes to where there's no poop, you know, like trying to keep the cow's hay clean, but having nice feeders off the ground and having your animals being able to go under a tree if they don't have a barn. And you know, my cows don't have a barn, but they're so much happier when I put them on the pasture where they can be under the trees. And you know, I think some of the smaller animals like goats and sheep do need a barn to stay warm and healthy. All animals would love to have a house, but some of them you see around here, like the cows and horses, don't always. But goats definitely need a house. They hate getting wet, so they hate getting rained on, and that just keeps them healthier and warmer. And having a nice bed of straw in the winter that's not wet is really important to keep the worms away and keep them healthy. So, yeah, I think that's cuts me. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, all the willows, the weeping willow, and then the willow bushes, and then the other globe willow, they all have the medicinal properties. Yeah.
Just another word about copper deficiency. It's pretty well known in these parts around what Emily was saying in the soil. But it's balanced in the chemical world with zinc. And so if you can find a way to administer zinc, even if it's in a mineral form, that will help their bodies to utilize more efficiently what copper they encounter. And zinc is pretty prolific in almost any brassica. So if you can get your animals on any kind of brassica, be it a mustard or any other kind of kale or any of those brassicas, really help to balance their utilization of copper. Doesn't correct the deficiency, it just allows them to utilize copper better when their zinc balance is higher.
I wanted to mention Juliette de Berkeley-Levy. She's an amazing European gypsy herbalist. This book is called The Complete Herbal for Farm and Stable. So this is, you know, this has listing of symptoms, plants, you know, if you ever have any problems, you know, I mean, this goes through some materia medica, It goes through, in the beginning, goes through all these different plants and how you can use them for animals. And then in the second half, it goes through the animals and problems and what plants to use for them. And it's just, this is an amazing book. She also has one for the dog and cat, and she also has one just for cats. And so I would highly recommend this book as your encyclopedia. And she's really just an amazing woman. I think she's dead, isn't she? Yeah. So, and then this is a DVD that I thought maybe we could get together sometime and watch it. And maybe now we could have like an outdoor evening, like screening or something. So this is a movie about her, Juliet of the Herbs, and it's just a really sweet film, and just to get to know her and her work and what she did. But she raised goats in Europe, and it's Juliet, and then it's DeBairacli, and then her second last name is Levy. Juliet DeBairacli-Levy.
She's a fantastic author and has a lot of books available through Ash Tree Publishing and such good reads.
Yeah, so if you want herbs and animals, this is your gal.
And she also has Herbs for Children, on and on, stories of her gypsy life, just great books.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for engaging with me this morning. Yeah. Yeah. And if you have any questions, you can ask me throughout the day if you think of anything. And yeah, I love working with plants and animals, and it's a great combination. Yeah.
Have you seen, because you didn't always have cows, have you seen your pastures change appreciably since you've had a mixed herd on them, either to the better or to the detriment?
Yeah, I think the mixed herd is ideal. So where I used to live on Garvin Mesa, for about 6 years I kept sheep on it, and I would only keep them there in the summer, and then they were lambs, and I'd process them in the fall. And over those 6 years I saw the clover go away, the alfalfa go away, and the orchard grass take over. Because the sheep weren't eating the orchard grass, it was going to seed, they were leaving these huge clumps. And they were eating all the clover before it could go to seed. And so then I took a year off and didn't have any animals in there, and then I got the cows. And the first year I had the cows, I had 2 sheep, 2 cows, and 2 pigs living together out there. And it was so cute, first of all. Just like, it was so cute to see them. They all interacted together, and it was just really sweet. And the next year after that, I had never, like, that was the year that all the clover came back, and the yellow alfalfa, that short little yellow alfalfa came back. And it was just amazing to see, because, the cows were eating what the sheep weren't eating, and then the pigs were going around and, like, breaking up the cow poops and, like, kind of digging things up. And it was really cool to see that. I really like the mixed herd model. It doesn't always work because, like, cows can be naughty, and you don't want to get your little animals hurt if the cows have horns and stuff like that. But I found that they all were able to figure it out. And right now I actually have my goats and cows together. The goats can go into their own area to get away from the cows, but the goats have learned, like, if the cow's walking near them, they just run away. Like, they're not scared of them, but they know to just kind of stay away from them because they have horns and they're really big. And then it's cute to see too, like, the other night I was out there and the goats were going crazy and were, like, doing laps around the cows, and the cows were just, like, standing there, like, just, like, moving their heads really slowly, like, looking at them. And so I think not only physically, but, like, the spiritual energetics of having the mixed herd on a pasture really kind of increases its vitality. It obviously brings, they're eating different things, it's bringing different poop, but I think having those kind of different expressions out there, makes all the other things out in the pasture kind of in celebration of kind of this party that's happening out there. And I think having the cows brings a certain energy, and having the goats brings a certain energy, and having them together, I think, just really improves the fertility and vitality of the pastures. But I'm impressed most with the cows and how they deal with the pasture and how they regenerate it. My goats, if they're alone on a pasture, they're going to leave a lot of things, and then the cows just moved through and ate everything that they didn't eat. And so yeah, I think, and then having chickens, always. Sorry, I keep leaving chickens out of the conversation, but having chickens in any of these systems is a huge benefit. I kept 4 chickens this winter. I was in like a really transitional place, but I just kept 4 chickens because I knew that I had to have chickens in with the goats for the parasite and fly control. They go around the barn and they scratch up and they eat all the larvae, and having them in with these animals that are, pooping, it just really, really helps. So one year I didn't have chickens one winter, and I was the worst fly problem I ever had. And it's just so interesting to see if you let those chickens go in there that they'll really kind of, there's a balance because they create their own poop, which brings flies too. So, 100 chickens in a goat barn might not be that beneficial, but 10 chickens in the barn, 15, like I don't think that they would poop enough to create more worms really, and that they would add by scratching and eating all the larvae and stuff.
You can also, if you don't want to have chickens around, you can put a little bit of whole grain in your feed, and the birds will come in and do the same. They'll kick around and break up the poop piles and to pick out the grain, and they'll scatter and they'll eat the larvae, etc. I've flocks of birds.
Oh, great! Yeah.
Yeah, they just go nuts.
Oh, that's so cool. Or maybe the wild turkeys. You get the turkeys to come in and clean out your barn. But yeah, I think it's very beneficial to have animals working together. Ducks, they say ducks are a great addition to kind of an orchard situation to clean up pests and stuff like that. So yeah. Well, I would let them run around the orchard on Garvin Mesa, and just, they didn't push the fence because they had so much space, but I did have to make sure that the fence down low was good for them. And I found that when I let those pigs run around the whole 6 acres, they didn't really destroy too much. They had like their one spot I had for them that I put water in so they could have like a bath spot, and they really messed that spot up. But for the rest of the 6 acres, they just kind of like ran around and didn't like harm it too much in terms of digging and stuff like that. I found that pigs are pretty good. I mean, when they do get out, it's kind of a nightmare, but they're if you keep their fence good, then they will stay in. I've seen pigs stay in with one electric line like this high off the ground, just one line. They just hate getting their nose zapped. So, they can get big and boisterous and be weird, but I've found that giving them lots of space, and letting them run like that, just added so much more to the meat. They're able to eat the fruit and like that. So yeah, they did good out there in the pasture, and there's different breeds that'll do better on pasture than other breeds. Okay, well, thanks everyone.
So I think Emily covered an awful lot of what is necessary to know or is helpful to know when you're raising animals. I think we're big proponents of mixed grazing. We have donkeys and mules, and I have dairy cows. My husband has beef cows. We have sheep. We don't have goats.
Smart.
Well, the sheep will go in and eat all the little stuff. They're nibblers, so they eat all the little stuff. The cows go in with a big tongue and make a swath like this and just move through the pasture. that way. The donkeys, you put them into a pasture and they'll go right for like the old nasty dried up thistles, right? And the mules, same thing, they'll eat the willows and things like that. Whereas, you know, the goats will go and eat your curtains in your house and the upholstery out of your car and, you know, the rest of that. So we've stayed away from goats altogether. But we also have chickens, and I had geese, and everybody made me get rid of my geese. This is an interesting story. Actually, I raised these geese from babies, and so they imprinted on me, and so they'd hear my voice, and they'd all just start yelling and come running. And finally, everybody made me get rid of the geese, and so I gave a pair to somebody up on Redlands Mesa, and I was up there visiting my friend Jake Tackiff, and all of a sudden this goose started squawking. It heard my voice and it came running. And he said, oh, this goose just flew in one day and it attached itself to one of his sheep. And so it was just living with this one sheep. But it was like, oh my God. And I don't remember who the woman was that got the geese, so I couldn't tell him where to take it back, but it just flew in somewhere. That was pretty weird. Anyway, the thing about the mixed grazing is that it will control your weeds and it will keep the pastures healthier. I mean, not only do you get them grazing at different levels and grazing different plants, they're also manuring differently. So like, you know, Emily was talking about the way the manure can help to bring the vitality to the field, where you're pushing through everything. So you're getting, it's like she's saying, give your animals a mixed, you know, diet. We're giving the pastures a mixed diet in that same way. So there's a difference about when you cut your hay for meat or for milk. For milk, you want to cut it before the plants flower. So it's at the leaf stage, which is the water stage, which is what's going to make more milk. And then you cut it when it's flowering so that you're making, that's at the air stage, so they're making more meat. So, you know, we have both, so we have to kind of change how we cut our pastures, but you don't always hit it right because, frankly, hay season is just like, just get it in the barn, whatever. So, and then the thing about transitioning from winter, Emily talked about winter hay, and you'll get much richer milk then. And when you transition into the spring grasses, you'll get, you know, less. But it also depends on your lactation, because usually our animals are birthed in the spring and they'll have, you know, higher fat content in the beginning of their lactation, and it goes down as the cow doesn't need more. Here's a really interesting thing that Don LaRoe told me, that they did a test on trying to figure out if the animals could sequester their fat in their milk, which, you know, like a cow will hold back if it's, until it relaxes and is sure that its calf is okay and it knows it has plenty of milk, it'll hold back its milk. And so you kind of struggle to get it to let the milk down and to be able to, I mean, goats I'm sure do the same thing, but they can literally sequester their cream in their udders. They did a thing with, I can't remember if it was goats or sheep, I think it was sheep, and they took, maybe it was goats, they took the kids away from the moms, and then they randomly fed the milk that they were milking to the kids or not. And it was random. It wasn't like every other day they gave the milk to the babies. And they weren't with them. I mean, they were in a separate barn, and somehow the sheep, they would measure the fat content of the milk, and the sheep would always hold, they would always give less fat on the days when it wasn't going to their babies. And every time they would feed the babies, they'd test that milk and it would have more fat in it. And they knew where it was going intuitively, but the animals can read our minds. I mean, they read our thoughts. That's how they communicate. So, but it was really interesting because they can literally sequester the fat content. Not only can they hold their milk back, but they can sequester the fat content, which is just kind of interesting. So anyway, that transition from winter hay to the spring grass, you do have to be careful of scours, get diarrhea. And sometimes you need to put them onto pasture for a short period of time and build it up day by day, and then feed them hay if they get scoury, especially because that's often when they're birthing. And if you're going to have problems with animals, you're going to have them when you're birthing. That's when all the problems come. And so you don't want them to get worn down by being scoury, and so you need to put them back onto some hay. And I think that we should have brought some hay over because you could see, you can go through your hay bales and, you know, you could just tell whether it's, we need grass hay for the donkeys and for the mules because too rich a hay will cause them to founder and, you know, it's just not good for them. But for the dairy cows, we want really rich fodder. Although cows can founder, so you do have to be somewhat careful with it. Then we will graze, like they'll all browse to some degree, not like goats will, but they will all browse. And so I can graze the cows. I don't even know if they're still there, but they were in the orchard just a little while ago. You can graze them in the orchard after the spring sap is run, because if you do it when the sap is running, they go for that sugar, and they'll go and they'll kill your trees because they'll strip the bark up. So you have to be, you know, mindful of the rotation of all the components of the farm when you're moving your animals from place to place. And that's something that you either need to just talk to other people about, or you just learn, usually by mistakes. But they'll eat more of the trees and the bushes in the spring when the sap is running. So for deworming, I use the vinegar, and you can make it with, you know, use a vinegar infusion. And I always put it in the water 3 days before the full moon for those 3 days, because that's when the worms are active, and so then it flushes them out of their system. And when we farmed in Scotland, we farmed in Australia, and we farmed here. So we got the, you know, soaking wet to the dry desert Mediterranean climate to here. And my husband doesn't buy into any of this, and I would use the vinegar on all the animals, and he would go out and take fecal samples and take it to the vet and get it tested, like constantly. And they were always like amazed. We never had worms. We had really, really low worm counts, and, you know, finally he had to give in and go, okay, so it works, right? But what an economical way to do it. And I just have the big, you know, tanks of water, and I just glug some cider vinegar in. I use organic because we're all biodynamic and organic. And so anyway, and the thing about the copper is, one of the homeopathic remedies for that is to make your vinegar infusion with chicken feathers. So just dissolve the chicken feathers in the vinegar for a while. Like I just take, you know, a gallon of the vinegar and put a lot of chicken feathers in there, and then use that to dose the rest of the vinegar that goes into the tanks, and you're getting the copper, so you're getting a homeopathic release of copper. Or we learned this from Enzo Nastati, who comes to teach us that like in trees that get, you know, like peach curl or whatever with your peaches, they spray everything with copper. Well, you can solve that by simply burying copper feathers around, chicken feathers around the tree, and then you get a homeopathic dose of copper into the plant, which is not a toxin. I mean, the copper is a toxin, and it'll screw up the balance of everything else. So that's a really good way to do that.
So do chickens always have copper in their feathers, even if we don't have much copper in the soil? We still have,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. When you do that infusion with the apple cider vinegar, how long do you infuse it for?
Well, you know me, I forget, and it might be there for 6 months. Probably doesn't need to be that long.
There isn't any indication of how long?
No, because they'll get all mushy and, you know, like start dissolving and stuff. So then you just strain the vinegar, but the copper's gone into it. Okay, so I had Alberto and Dee Dee both brought some pasture samples. And I got this chart for you to look at. This is prairie grasses, so some of these are not specific species that we have, but we have species that are similar to them, to show you the difference in the root zones. And so this is Kentucky bluegrass here. This is what your lawn would be if you didn't live in Paonia. And then, you know, you just look at these things. I mean, this is 15 feet here. And some of the, you know, the alfalfa and stuff will go, you know, way, way deep. So it's just to give you an idea of the depths that these root systems are going, and sort of our watering needs. Here we're in my opinion, we're in a really tragic state here because they're piping all our ditches. And in 15 years, we are going to have deserts, and we're going to have a real lack of vitality in our plants because the water is one of the major sources of vitality. And it's the movement, it's the sunlight, it's the air, the free flowing of the water that keeps it healthy. That's why, you know, a river or an ocean can depollute itself from almost anything given enough time. But you put it into a plastic pipe and you run it in a straight linear pattern with no movement, plus you're putting all the nanotechnology and the chemicals from the pipes into your water, and it's dead. So we will need a lot more water. You cannot water with piped water with the same amount as you need from free-flowing water because it doesn't have the vitality. You need a lot more water. And one of the problems that we've got is we're going to have this, our irrigation that runs down there, that's Minnesota, and it's been piped already. And it was, we lost 3/4 of an acre of a field at the top already since they piped it. They're now typing Turner ditch, which is what feeds this, and we'll just see what happens. You know, I mean, I know what's going to happen, but you can't convince them of that. But anyway, so I've had the NRCS come out several times when I realized that they really were going to pipe this ditch so that we could talk about some of the alternatives. And these guys are fantastic. I mean, they really are knowledgeable, and they're really there to help us, and they have all the best of intentions. But, you know, I would have long discussions with them. You know, they want to pressurize this system, and then everybody can put in sprinkler systems. And there are some great advantages to sprinkler systems after you get over the shock of the initial cost of them, in the ease of doing it. You know, I mean, I pay people to go out and change my irrigation water twice a day, the whole irrigation season. And it takes time, and it also is a skill. Nobody can just go out there and do it right away. It's a skill. But the difference is, well, okay, so in that case, if I'm irrigating from here and we open the pipes up there, the top part of these fields are going to have more water than it is when it gets to the bottom of the field. And you can tell just by looking at the row of poplar trees there, the ones at the top are bigger than the ones at the bottom because they have gotten more water over the years that they've been there. So there's that. And with sprinkler systems, you're going to get an even spread. However, what they want is to get an even spread and only water this much down. They only want the water to go there. And people are happy with that if they're not really thinking, because they're getting their crop, they're cutting their hay, everything seems fine. But what's happening to these plants? What's happening to the diversity of your pasture? What's happening to the etheric vitality of your pasture and your whole property? Because that etheric vitality is what feeds the vitality of the entire farm. I mean, it's not just that it's living in that grass and the animal takes it in, it's in the atmosphere, it's in the environment of the farm. And when you start losing all of these, the second thing is you get to a drought year, like we're in drought year now from this drainage, Minnesota down south, we're in drought. That side has plenty of water, we don't. But when you lose that, you lose these top plants that are used to getting that water, and they only have a little bit of root. They start dying off, and then what do you have? You have bare ground that bakes. Whereas if you maintain this diversity, and you have the ones that are deep-rooted and are bringing minerals from different levels and all of that, then you have something that will survive. It's like the clover is a biennial, so it only really produces every 2 years. So on the year that it's producing, it's shading, other things that are down below, and they have a chance to either die back or to come forward. And so the pastures are always changing. They're evolving year by year according to the conditions at the moment. If you have a diversity like this in your fields, you can withstand almost anything. But if you have a diversity that only goes 6 inches, maybe 8 inches deep, it's like everybody always wants to diversify their stock portfolio, because if one sector crashes, you've got something else. You haven't lost everything, and it's no different in your fields. And so I'm not a proponent of the piping thing. I've been complaining at our ditch meetings, and after 4 years, I finally got 4 more people to go with me, but we lost. So that's going to be a problem in the future. I can pretty much guarantee it's going to be a problem. But, we keep doing this to the earth, and then we learn, and there's no going back. After the polar bears are all dead, we go, oh, whoops. So this is something to consider, I think, when we're farmers, we are stewards of the earth, and we are responsible for every component within it. And that means that the life of our animals are, you can mess with me, you can mess with my husband, don't mess with my cows. They're, and the plants, they're under our guardianship. And so we have to be aware of all the components and really look at the bigger picture. So when we've seeded, because I have a dairy, we need rich fodder. So 2 of our farms, we have a farm over on Pitka, and we have another farm over here, and we have these 2 farms here. And we reseeded 2 of the pastures with a specific fodder for cows. And that's what this one is from, one of those pastures. So it's made with, I don't put alfalfa seed in anything. Not that I don't like alfalfa, it is a rich protein source for the cows, and it has a super deep root system, so it's actually breaking up the subsoils, it's bringing minerals that normally would not be lifted up. But it's also genetically modified now, so any alfalfa that's here is getting crossed with GM because you can't stop the GM now. And so I just keep it out of my pasture mixes. It still pops up because, like I said, it's got a 30-foot root system, and so it still comes up. But we're trying to kind of let go of the alfalfa and go to others. So I use bird's foot trefoil, which is just adorable. It's this little leaf that looks like a bird's foot and has a little yellow flower, and so it's really sweet and kind of fun. And sandfoin and both yellow and red clover, and then a whole mixture of pasture grasses. And then within that, like I said, a little bit of the alfalfa will come up, the plantain comes in. The ones that are native here come back anyway, and you can see them in this. Of course, he didn't dig really deep, so you can't see the mixed soil profile, but if you dug a deep profile, you would see the different root systems and how they're going to different levels. This is from Dee Dee's pasture. She has a really cool old farm down in Hotchkiss, and this, she said, is from the edge of the pasture, so it's mostly just your mixed pasture grasses with some alfalfa. And then this is more in where she's been, this is on the edge, so it doesn't get as much attention. It's not getting hayed, it's not getting
cut,
yeah, because you can't get to the very edge of your fields, whereas this one is. So, she's got a lot of plantain in here, and mixed fodder, which of course is going to increase the health of your animals, the health of your farm, the health of everything. So that's a pretty important component of your pasture management. Not everybody can plow up and reseed a field. So one way to do it, if you're limited on time and energy and money, is to just do strips, because it will help to seed over. You can do a couple of strips across a field and get new growth in there. So with us, with mixed grazing, we don't generally have all the animals in there at once. We just sort of rotate them around, because like I said, they all eat different things. And the cows will go in, and we'll pre-graze everything with the cows and then bring the donkeys and the mules in, because we don't want them to eat rich food. So we get rid of most of it, and then they can come in afterwards and they'll clean up all the edges. Or we always will bring the animals in after we've hayed to clean all the verges, to clean the ditch areas and to make sure that everything gets pulled back for weeds. And Emily was talking about fresh water for your animals, which is super important. If you want to, you could walk out. There's an automatic waterer out there, and we have them all over the farm. They're solar waterers, so that they run from an irrigation pipe and they don't freeze, and so you don't ever have to haul water. The mules and the donkeys like them because they have a little ball on top of the basin, and they like to play with the ball, but they have to push the ball down and then drink, and they'll learn right away how to get the water out of there. But it's really nice because then you don't have to be filling tanks and chopping the ice out of them in the winter. And they make double ones so you can have them on each side of a fence and have 2 pastures at once. And they're expensive. I can't remember what they are, but they're expensive. But I think they're worth the investment. Just buy them one at a time and make your life easier, because I'm too old to do that anymore. So. No, it's running on on piped water. So you see there's a hydrant there. We just went off of that hydrant right to so you just have to dig down, just like you would a phosphorus hydrant. That's what they are. But then they have a basin in there, and it's just on an automatic fill. It's got a float valve in there. And we've had them for years, never had anything go wrong with them. Yeah, I think you can either order them or you can get them from, like Sissons. Sissons could get them for you, whatever, in Delta. But they save a ton of time and effort. You have to have a water line, and it helps if you have Alberto and a backhoe, but.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Why do they need solar or anything?
So they don't freeze in the winter. They're not solar, they're just black, and so they're solar heated, so they don't freeze in the winter.
Oh, I see, the solar energy.
Even overnight they don't freeze.
No.
Wow.
And they don't.
Insulated a little bit too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. They're kind of like, how when you do a frost-free hydrant, you dig the trench and then you put your thing in, and then you pack straw in there and then you cover it back up. I think they do them the same way. And it's on a concrete pad. So, the innards are in there. But we put one in, and then we went, oh yeah, we want every pasture to have these, and we got them all because they're just awesome. They just take so much of your workload away.
Tap into the city water because your ditch water turns off.
Yeah, no, it's on a water line.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't use, there's no evaporation, really, because they've got it uses very little water, so it's a real economical way. When the water's flowing in the open ditch, they'll go and drink out of that, or they'll drink out of the ponds. But the donkeys and the mules like to play with the little ball in there anyway.
Do they build up any scum in them? Do you have to clean them?
No.
Because they don't get light to them.
They don't get light, and they don't get air, and they, only when they're drinking. And, and if you have a bunch of animals in the pasture, they're drinking cows drink quite a bit.
And you can have a lot of, cows and.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They just
Yeah.
take turns at it.
Yeah. And they'll go over and, like I said, the mules and the donkeys play with them, but the cows just go and drink and then move on. We do biodynamic sprays, or we do homeodynamic sprays, and, there's coming and more a need to spray more. I can tell the difference between these fields up here and these fields down here. Like I said, this one is piped water and this one's not piped water, and so there's a difference in that regard, but also there's not as much water down there. They turn the water back to the source when they pipe it, so you don't get as much water. But it just requires more attention to giving the vitality back to the field in another way, which using biodynamic sprays or using, the compost tea sprays, those kinds of things can help. We have one pasture, if you want to see a mistake, when you can get some real problems, is down here we've got hay grazer in this one area. It was going to be part of Barry's market garden, but because we're in drought, we weren't going to have water, and so he didn't plant that field, and we just put it into hay grazer, that's a Sudan grass mixed with sorghum. So it's a really drought tolerant because it grows in the Sudan, and it will just go dormant, and then when you get some rain, it'll start growing again. So we decided, well, we'll just plant it because we don't want bare soil, so we'll just plant that out. And Alberto said, you can give it to the cows. I said, not my cows. You can give it to 80's cows, but not my cows. I'm not feeding my cows that. But anyway, so Alberto got a little excited, and he plowed when it was too wet. And now we have these gigantic 2 patches of thistle. And it's awful. But we had out at this other farm out here, Lucas Farm, we have a big patch, 2 patches of thistle in the middle of our best hay pasture. And so we made, Alberto and Cindy Ziegler and I made a maceration where we took all the thistle and chopped it up and put it into a big barrel, and then filled the barrel with water. And after 3 days, we went out and took the water off of the top with I just used watering cans, and I just walked out and I just watered the thistle patch, and then waited another 4 days, which in that time I had it sitting by the edge of the pond. The water came up in the pond, and so it was like way out there, and I had to wade out to get it was a nightmare. But anyway, I got it done. So we did it at 3 days and then at 7 days. And usually you have to do it several times. When you're giving a maceration, what you're doing is you're accomplishing the work of the plant in a really short period of time. The thistle came here, which is obvious because the clay soil the structure got destroyed, and so it got compacted. And so now the thistle needs to come to break that back up, because it will go deep and it will spread out and it will go laterally and it will break all that up. So what we're doing by making a maceration is we're giving the message to the water, and the water can then give the message to the soil, and the soil can take that in and accomplish the change that would normally take years and years and years for a thistle patch to accomplish. You can get it soon. But generally it takes, multiple applications. You wait for the thistle to grow and you do it again, and it gets weaker and weaker and weaker, goes away. Well, this one out here, we did it one time, and it never grew enough to do a second maceration because I never had any more thistle. So I tried it in one of the patches down here, and the other patch I didn't do anything to. So we'll see how that goes. But that's another thing, that by using the herbs that are just right here, that we scorn, can help to cure problems and make it better. But don't plow your soil when it's too moist. It was just on the edge too. I mean, it looked like it was fine, but then it wasn't. And so, it's a mistake, and then you have to go back and try and fix it. So that's one of the things that happened in the soils.
I'm going to go back to chickens and
Okay.
the mixed field, like making strips of growing up pasture for chickens. Is that a good idea? Is it possible?
Yeah. I mean, I just redid my chicken yard because something got 90 chickens of mine last year, and I had to start all over. So I'm replanting in there, and I'm just transplanting, comfrey and, different plants that I have around, catmint and whatever. I'm transplanting those in there. Some of them, they go right in and eat, and you have to cage them out until they get big enough. And some of them they are just fine with, but they will always scratch around for, whatever's in there, whether it's the plants itself. Like if I open the gate, right now I've got them closed. It's almost like an aviary because I'm trying to keep them alive. But if I open the gate and I go in and I'm doing stuff, they see that pasture grass outside in the orchard, and they just want to go right out there, and they'll just go out and start eating the grass. So we're expanding it now to give them more space. And I put a lot of currant bushes in because they love to get under the currant bushes. They'll eat the berries that are on the bottom, and they'll root around in there. And so that's also a really excellent place. Like I have lots of comfrey that grows right amidst those currant bushes because they like that, shady, kind of moist area, and nettle. And they'll just eat all those kinds of things. But the things that, most people consider weeds in their lawn environment, the chickens love them. And that's a really good way. I mean, my yolks are like orange. They're so dark, and that's because they've got this mixed forage. So, but and they'll find what they need. So, good thing. Give them good quality chopped hay. I mean, alfalfa hay would be great for the chickens.
Especially in the winter, I noticed that they just love give the chickens a flake of alfalfa in the winter, and I love it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I usually.
My chickens are fine. They lay amazing eggs, but it seems like they're losing their feathers a lot.
Well, they may be molting right now.
Yeah, but it's almost constant.
Oh, well.
So I don't know if it's a mites or something like that.
Do they have dust baths? Do they have a place?
Oh, yeah.
They've dug holes and can.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't-
Probably not. They,
Do you have a rooster?
No. Just one in the house.
They like to have their rooster. They do like their rooster. How many hens do you have?
8.
You have enough for a rooster. Just put an ad in the shopper. Trust me, you'll get 25 calls. Rooster wanted, and they'll call you, and you'll get some beautiful roosters. I've gotten dozens over the years. Yeah, but yeah, just mixing grasses and different things in there is great. And you know what you give them in the wintertime, I do sprouts for my chickens so that they're getting something that is alive and green. So I do a lot of, you know, mung beans and sunflower sprouts and, you know.
So rich in fatty acids.
Yeah, but
oils,
just to give them, you know, just to give them live greens in the
They
wintertime.
get our, you know, whatever
Yeah,
we're cooking.
exactly.
scraps.
And they love that. So, and mine get obviously heaps of cheese and whey and milk and, you know, whatever else. And I sprout a lot of grains in the milk. I just will make them a tub and put grain in there and then fill it with milk and then just leave it for several days. And then after it's soaked all the milk up, dump it out, and they just love that. So they'll scrounge around for that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
So I'm on a piece of land that really would like to have animals on it. There's been lots of areas of disturbance, and I have so many noxious weeds, just like so much bindweed and white top, and I keep on, and we're fencing in about an acre orchard right now with deer fencing, so it's getting into a place where like having animals seems more feasible for us. But we're having a hard time thinking of like what animal would be most advantageous for us to like have there, but also move out of that fenced area to some of the other areas and on the land that really need that fertility and help with weed management. And I keep on thinking about getting a cow, and that keeps on feeling intimidating because then I feel like I need 2 cows so that they have a friend. But yeah, what do you think?
Well, I think that there's a couple of things. The first one is I would caution you. I tried to get Pat to get cows for years because I'm a big animal person and Pat's the plant person. And I was going, you need to get a cow. You've got to have a cow. You're biodynamic. You got to have a cow. And she just wouldn't do it until she was ready. And then as soon as she did, I was like going, oh, God, I see the wisdom of that woman because she wasn't ready before. So one of the biggest mistakes I think people make is getting the animal before they've got their infrastructure in place. And I can't tell you how many calls we get and how many desperate people Alberto has to go save the life of their animals or whatever because they are not ready and they don't know what they're doing and they make giant mistakes. I've got a cow here right now that we had to go and bring it here because things were going completely kaflooey. And they're not idiot people, they just don't know anything about that. They're ignorant people. So do a lot of questioning, do a lot of talking to other farmers, get somebody to come out and look and help you, you know, problem solve your piece of property because every place is different. And that's the first advice I'd give you. Don't do it before you're ready. Because then you like are going backwards all the time. And then the next thing is to try and figure out, you know, what it is you really want to accomplish. If all you want is weed management, like, you know, there's nothing better for weed management than goats if you don't mind if they eat your upholstery out of your car. They're capricious, you know, they are capricious. That's why they're capras. But so they're, you know, it's far more, a goat with horns is far more intimidating than a cow with horns, unless it's a belted Galloway, you know. Or even the Scottish Highlanders are probably the next. Belted Galloway is the most dangerous cow on the planet. There's more injuries from belted Galloways, even than the Brahmas, anything else. And then the Highlanders come close. They're both Scots. I lived in Scotland for a long time. Anyway, so, but, you know, to have a dairy cow, I mean, you know, they're just the sweetest things ever. They're just like, you know, my cows will come into the dairy and we'll milk them and they'll go back out and then they'll come back around. If you don't close the gate, they come right back in again and just want to hang with you. And, you know, so, you know, that's a completely different thing. And if you want a dairy cow, I can put you in touch with people who have cows that I would have no doubt would be awesome for you. So that's, that's one thing, but mixed grazing too. And, if a cow is by itself and doesn't have another cow, it will attach to another animal. It will attach to a sheep or, a lot of times to a dog or whatever. I believe in having, two. But if you're getting a dairy cow, it's going to have a baby. And then it's going to have its baby for a while. But don't leave the baby on too long, because then you'll end up having to send your cow to me to break that cycle. And you'll have a belted Galloway in your flock. So, yeah. And then, I think the other thing is getting your fencing set up correctly, so that you make it, like those waterers. Awesome. Saves you so much work and time and effort and cold and distress and everything else. Totally worth the money. So are your fences. So our farm, we were lucky because our farm in Australia was already set up. A guy raised bulls there. But here's an interesting story about biodynamics too, is that, but he had these fences set up that everything had an alley. To get from one fence to another, all we had to do is go and open gates, and they just automatically go where you want them. It didn't matter if I was taking them from the far pasture there to a pasture that's 80 acres away. They could get there, and that's the only place they could get to because the fences were all set up correctly. And, that's a thing that can happen over time, but what a joy to be able to manage things that way. And then you get, if you get an association with your lead cow, all you have to do is whistle that cow. Alberto can whistle and the cows will come from town. They'll come from anywhere to him, and he's like, why don't they just whistle at him? It's like, because they're not you. So, but anyway, you'll get them so that they're trained that way, and then they're really simple. But it's a process, and it takes patience, and you got to kind of figure out. Okay, so here's a story. The guy that lives up on the hill there, we manage a whole bunch of these farms around us, because people have property and they don't know what they're doing, and they don't want to have cows of their own, and so they have us do it. Anyway, this guy up here, 80 has, my husband has beef cows, and at one point he went up and he got rolled by one of his cows. It had just had a baby, and she's kind of a bitch, this cow. We're getting rid of her. I think we did get rid of her because he got rolled by her. And so he had told the neighbor that story. And so the neighbor, then we had my cows up there who are like dogs, right? And one of them got out of the fence, and he's terrified. He's just like, oh my God, what am I going to do? And he's calling, and his wife is calling, and I get a message. And, so finally, 80 gets the message, and he goes up there, and he's trying the cows are up in this field, and the one cow is down here. And so there's these pastures that go up this way. So he's trying to, without getting too close because he's scared of this cow, because he thinks it's going to roll him, he's trying to get the cow to go back up where the cows are, which makes sense, right? But 80 showed up and he said, well, there's a gate right there. I just opened that gate. So he opens this gate and the cow went in there and was in the pasture, and he's like going, God, that's really great. Knowing and understanding that the cows don't want to go in corners like that. They want to move like they move. Like they do this with their tongue to eat their food. That's how they move too. They just move around. So if you think like that and you pay attention to how they are in their natural environment, you'll be able to figure out what's most comfortable for them. And when they're comfortable, everything goes easy. It's when they get scared, they get agitated, those kind of things that you run into problems. So take it slow and easy, and learn as you go, and ask for help, because there's heaps of people. There's people right in this room, several people in this room that could help you through that process too. So, does that help?
Yeah, thank you, Caren.
Yeah. Anything else?
What do you think would be like the least destructive animal in an orchard?
Sheep.
Sheep, like little baby doll sheep. Yeah.
Sheep, they'll still reach up into your trees.
Uh-huh.
But like I said, if you keep them out of there in the spring when the sap's running, then but the problem with that is that, like I said, sheep are nibblers. So they want to eat the grasses that's just coming up. They want it, and that's why they will keep, weeds back, because they'll eat them when they're, like bindweed is a wonderful green to eat when it's young, but then it's awful and everybody hates it, because it gets, when it gets older, nobody likes it. So sheep are the same way. They like to eat it when it's young, but they don't really want to go for it after it's older. Donkeys.
Yeah.
They're as smart as we are, and no problem.
Yeah, they're like tumbleweeds. Donkeys
Yeah,
are-
they'll eat the nastiest stuff.
Yeah.
I've heard that they can struggle on like an alfalfa pasture. Like
Yeah.
If you have too good of a pasture, you shouldn't get
No.
donkeys.
No, like my donkeys are in the verge on the areas around the pastures. I would never put them out on these pastures. Well, actually, that's not true, because we had those donkeys for probably 10 years. They never, ever got anything close to founder, and then 2 years ago they did. And once they start toward founder, we stopped it before they foundered. But we can't put them on the rich pasture anymore. I don't know what it was. But they're desert animals.
It's age.
Yeah.
What's metabolisms change?
Yeah.
And sugar, they can't process sugar.
Right.
Less and less as they get older.
Yeah. So
What does
And once they
founder
do
mean?
founder is when they get too rich of a feed, and it usually shows up in laminitis, which is, it would be like taking your fingernail and peeling it off. It's super painful, and yeah, they can get really sick from it. And it can cripple them, it can be terrible. But also, hoof maintenance is important. I used to help these ladies with donkey rescue at our farm in Australia, and I ended up with 13 donkeys, and I mean, some would come and literally their hoof should be like this, and it would be like curled like this up to their knee, because they'd never been maintained. And then it's a long, slow process, and they are such sweet animals, but they have a really long memory, and if they've been abused or things have happened to them, they don't forget easily. It would take sometimes years to get them to where they were trusting enough to be able to really integrate with us.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm a donkey person. Donkey cart.
What about just when we were in Denver, we got this amazing mix of chicken feed that I would travel a long distance to get. And I'm getting one that I think is high quality around here, but it does not look the same at all. It's very tailored to corn, it looks like. Which I think is okay. But I was just curious what you feed your chickens as supplementary when you're not pasturing, when they're not just out kind of roaming and finding what they want.
So I get my chicken feed base from Gillespie's at Living Farm. I just buy a whole wagon full, and then we put it in silos. But then we chop hay into it. So we chop our own hay. And then I mix grains from what we've harvested in there. So we will take our corn and literally chop the whole thing so that the cob and everything is chopped into it, and supplement it with that. Gillespie's don't go real high on the corn. He's got a really balanced mix. You could use it just the way it is, but I'm buying $2,000 worth of chicken feed at a time. I stretch it if I can. So I do things like I said. I add our high quality hay. I will chop in there, and you can do that just by throwing a leaf of hay out, with their feed and other grains. And then mine get like Emily's. Mine get a lot of supplement from the dairy, so they're getting a lot of milk and whey and cheese and then scraps. Composting for those kind of kitchen scraps doesn't really happen on a farm anymore. You got to get your dairy waste is what gets composted, So yeah, but I totally recommend Tom's Feed. I think it's high quality and it's organic, and they do a good job. And it's so easy to get, because it's self-serve.
Oh, you can just drive up there.
Yeah, you just drive up and you just get it. There's a silo, and you just fill a 5-gallon bucket, and there's a mailbox. You put your money in the mailbox.
The Gillespie's feed is really nice. I just feed my chickens whole grain from the Gillespie's, so I don't feed them like a feed mix. My chickens are free range, get a lot of milk, and I sprout those grains in the winter. But yeah, for 10 years I haven't fed a feed. I thought about it this winter and got like a little sample bag from Michelle from the Delta elevator. My chickens, like, I put it in the feeder and they like didn't even know what it was. They just like ran right outside. So I just do whole grain. I don't grind it or anything. I sprout it. Like Caren said, I'll put it in a bucket of milk like that. Whey, and then just because they're free range, they're getting so many bugs. And but the Delta elevator does have a soy-free mix called like Hippie Chicks or something, and it looks really nice. It has like split peas in it, and it comes in a bag. So that could be something to try. She's importing it from, I think it's being made in Utah, but it's a nice soy-free option. And yeah. My soy-free option is not really feeding them, so
Yeah.
just let them eat the stuff that the goats like spill out of their feeder, and I'll sprinkle some grain on the ground. But yeah, so yeah, whole grains, whole local grain, and milk, and free range.
Okay.
Mhm.